Hello and welcome to this online tutorial for how to use DOS, the Desk Operation System, in performance of your duties as a desk assistant in the residence halls. So let's get started. This first video will cover shift transition when you start and end your shift. And so when you arrive, the first thing that we're going to want you to do is to click Clock In. And the main reason that we want you to do this first is because you'll notice that as soon as I click this button, DOS has time-stamped when you arrived, and this is the time that we expect to see you report in your timesheet in CatPause. If we notice that there is some discrepancy, then we start to ask questions, but there's a way to deal with that pretty easily, and I'll talk more about this in just a second. But now that we're at the clock in screen, we'll go ahead and fill out the information as requested, and I'll put my initials here. I'll talk a little bit more about initials later, so don't worry about that right now. For this shift, you need to report whether this is your scheduled shift, whether you're subbing for somebody, or whether the shift is part yours and part somebody else's. So for example, maybe you had a 1 hour shift, but the next person was going to be sick and asked for a sub, and so you picked up part of that shift as well, and so you've kind of got a 50-50. So for right now, though, we're just going to go with my scheduled shift. And so let's continue our clock in. On the next screen, it's going to ask you to pick one of the two. Are you an RA, SA, or specialist, like a bridge, or are you a standard desk assistant? So for this time, we'll go RA, SA, or specialist, and continue. Now, a few minutes ago, I mentioned about timestamping and making sure that the information matches what you put into your CatPause timesheet. And probably the best example of where a problem might pop up is occasionally, perhaps you're showing up to open a desk and the desk is locked and the person who's supposed to open it up is running a little bit late. So perhaps by the time you get everything set up and clocked in, DOS shows you showed up 10 minutes late, but you know that's not true. And so all you've got to do is put a comment in here that says, hey, I was here on time. DOS is going to say that I was late, but just so you know, I was here and was waiting to be let in. Just type out a brief explanation, and that's really all we need. So for right now, we'll skip the typing. We'll go ahead and complete our clock in, and we will move on to step 2 of arriving on your shift. Step 2 is counting in. Each of our residence hall front desks has a cash box that holds approximately $100. And so, but I tell you what, just to keep it simple, we're going to just pick an easy number for all these. And when you do your count of the cash box, you're not actually counting the money, you're just counting the number of each item. So if you have one $20 bill, you're just going to put 1. And so you're going to make your way through, and we're just going to put 1 for all of these to keep it easy. This column here, the cash boxes will have rolls of coins sometimes, and so instead of counting what those are, again, we're just going to stick with counting the numbers of them, and we're going to let DOS do the math for us. Stamps are also part of the cash box count, and so we'll enter the number of stamps we have, and it will do the stamp total for you. The other place where you actually have to put in a dollar amount is in this box here. Occasionally we'll get a $2 bill or a $1 coin or something like that. If we get any of those odd currencies, in that particular case, you've got to put in the actual dollar amount. But once you're done, if there's anything that you need to report, so for example, perhaps you dropped a quarter under the counter and you're like, hey, I know I'm responsible. I'll bring a quarter next time I work to make it back up. You can put a message in here, and that way your desk supervisor will be able to keep an eye on it and know that you're going to do what's necessary to get it taken care of. At this point, I'll show the information up here. We've provided a couple of boxes to help you determine whether you have counted in correctly. And this will make a little bit more sense when I demonstrate the count out portion, because what it's going to do is it's going to compare the current count to what the previous count was. And so right now I'm dealing with an empty system, so it won't show right, but we'll get back to this in just a little bit. So one piece I do want to point out is that because service to our students is most important, we offer the option of clicking finish later. And so if a student has come up and makes a request that you need to check out something, we would rather you help the student than continue to count and make them wait. So as you can see, when we clicked finish later, we got the option to click here to complete the cash box count. You can click that or the yellow button, either one, and it'll bring you right back in so you can finish. So for now, we're going to click complete count in, and you're going to see that you get a pop-up message because the count didn't match what was on the last one. Now, as I mentioned, this is actually the first count of a new system, and so there was not a previous count, so obviously it's kind of off. If you see yourself in a situation where the system is telling you that the count is off, it's going to give you this one-time reminder, but then the next time you do it, it's going to let you out of the system. Or, I'm sorry, let you out of the Cashbox count. After the Cashbox count, it's going to take you to the communication log. So we'll click OK. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to come to a section that shows messages that desk assistants have left from previous shifts that is important for you to know. So in this case, a previous desk assistant has put in that someone will be arriving to check into his room tonight, and we just want to make sure that we have the keys pulled and ready for him. And in this particular case, if the information had applied at the station and it was a day shift or a night shift, we would want to mark that. But if it's not if the shift that you're working is not at the station, that wouldn't necessarily apply. So, but once you've read it, you would come down to the bottom box and put your initials. And so the next time that you come into work, you're going to scroll through whatever messages are here, and once you get to one that has your initials in it, then you know you're all caught up on everything that you need to know. Once you're caught up on messages, click the home button, and that will take you to the last part of your check-in. And this is the desk shifts tasks. On this screen, we have different things that we want to make sure get done to keep the desk running smoothly through the day. Now, in this case, you can see that there's nothing on here. And so what this typically means is that either you've got a fresh system like this, or you might see yesterday's information. And so really what you're going to need to do is just click New Day, and then that's going to populate all of the fields, and you'll see the things that need to happen during the day. We schedule these throughout the day for a couple reasons. One is that, for example, if I was a hall director and I was having a judicial hearing with a student, I probably wouldn't want to be listening to the vacuum running right outside my office. The other thing is that we just want to make sure that that the responsibilities are spread evenly, so no one desk assistant is responsible for having to do everything. But as you make your way through the day, and you'll look down through to see what your responsibilities are. So we'll say it's 7 p.m. You'll just add your initials in as you do stuff during your shift, and once you're done, click Tasks Complete, and that will move you on back to the start screen. That pretty much concludes your check-in. If you're leaving your shift, things pretty much work in reverse, but there isn't as many steps to that. So the first thing you're going to do on departing your shift is click Clock Out. And if you remember earlier, I talked about how the Cashbox count is going to be compared to the last count. Well, in this case, you were the person that did the last count, so let's just put in our same numbers that we had before. And I believe we had $2. There we go. And so you can see that our counts all came up the same, and it's telling us that we balanced. This amount down here says under, but this is because I told you earlier that the Cashbox is supposed to have about $100. In this case, we were making up information, so we are about $43.66 under what the Cashbox should be. If you do find your Cashbox doesn't have enough change in it, then you probably want to let your desk supervisor know about it. But our count out is done, so we will complete the count out, and all that leaves is your clock out. And you're just basically going to run through things again. You've already told us when you started your shift that this was your scheduled shift. We'll continue. And if you remember earlier, I put down that I was an RA or specialist. Well, our RAs have to work a certain amount of hours at the desk as part of their contract that are not paid hourly. And so if this was one of those shifts, I would put down that this was a contract hour shift. If it happens to be kind of a half and half, maybe I worked for 3 hours and that wrapped up my requirements for the week and I worked a couple extra hours for pay, then that part would come in here. Lastly, if everything I was working was all paid, then I would put that in here. If there's any comments, like maybe you had to stay a few minutes late because the person coming in after you is late, whatever you think we need to know that's important so that when we're checking your timesheets, we know what's going on. Put your comments in there. I guarantee we'll see it. You don't need to send us an email, and you're pretty much good to go. You can see the timestamps up here, and so we will continue your clock out. And that brings us to the last screen where it's going to show us this is what we should be reporting in CatPause. Now, if you happen to be in a situation where what you put into CatPause is going to be a little bit different, perhaps this is one of those times where part of this shift is reported in CatPause and part of it isn't. That scenario being an RA who worked contract hours for, say, 2 hours and then 2 hours for paid, and they're only going to put 2 hours in there. Well, DOS might say you worked 4 hours, but you're only getting paid for 2, and so you're going to want to put those times in here down there, and that will let us know that you're basically acknowledging you're not getting paid for the whole shift. Again, if there's any clock out comments, put them there, complete your clock out, and you are pretty much good to go at that point. That concludes your check-in and check-out. I should notice or point out that as soon as I finished that step, CatPause came open, and we've set DOS up to automatically trip open CatPause because we really want you to log into your CatPause timesheet if these are paid hours and get those logged immediately so that we make sure that you're recording accurate information and not having to go back and track you down at the end of the month to figure out what happened. So I'll close that window, and that concludes part 1 of our training.